guys can pass your stuff up if you don't mind, and we'll get moving on the next section. Turn the lights off so you can see the screen. Please pass your papers forward. Please pass your papers forward.
I think just the citations. I was trying to write it perfectly really fast.
Okay.
It wasn't so good.
You got all your guys? Ladies, thank you very much. All right. Okay, so how are you guys all doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah?
I was messing with a little bit of the data from Tuesday, or Monday, yesterday.
Cool. Find anything cool?
I didn't get to do a lot of it, but I did at least a couple of sets. I feel like the first one, but the number 3 had a lot of
them
stuff in it.
This is messy.
I had to remind myself that that one was like one of the control subjects and not one of the ones that we were talking about with the 3, the neurologically, I think, was it neurologically damaged or they have amnesia?
Well, both.
Both.
They have amnesia from the neurological damage.
Okay. So, because I was like, oh, I'm deleting too much. I'm like, wait, these are control subjects. Just, yeah.
Yeah, so if any of you guys worked through the data as it was assigned, then you would have noticed that this data was a little messier than what we worked with before, right?
I'm like, why was that?
I was going to ask you the same thing, Fitria. Why was that?
Well, okay. okay. It was the first part was messy. Then when we got to the hippocampal damage, it looked neater compared to the other one.
Yeah. Why might that be?
Does it have to do with, I don't know. I'm just guessing. I was like, well, no, there was just a lot.
I was going to say,
It was, the first part was a lot of blinks, and they were young adults. So I just thought, I was like, maybe, was it just because they weren't taking it as seriously, or?
Okay, so there's a lot of different factors at hand, right? So we have a really, really large set of different data sets of lots of different subjects, 58 different people. They were recorded over different periods of time in the sense that you can't record 58 people in one day, right? So they're recorded over a span of time, and we can see that there's different factors and elements of the data recording that we can observe very clearly as being either somewhat messier data and somewhat cleaner data. So surprisingly, you guys said that the patients that you might have thought might have been a whole lot more messy were actually a lot cleaner.
Yeah.
In some regards, maybe not all regards,
No,
right?
yeah.
But in some ways, it was sort of surprising. Now, what was the suggestion that I offered you guys on actually going through that data yet last time we met?
To do the hippocampal patients last.
Yeah, so I said go through and do the patients last. Do you remember why we said that?
So we can have a better eye when we're looking at it.
Yeah, so you're going to be better trained and better, you got to have the rust out, you'll be better primed, you're going to be better tuned to be able to pick up the little elements of the EEG data, perhaps in some of the clinical amnesia patients, right? So that was also the case for me when I recorded them. I was a graduate student, I was learning. So when you save those patients for last, not only do you make sure that you've worked out any kinks or bugs in the program, the script, the experiment, but you also make sure you worked out any kinks or bugs in you as the experimenter, right? So that we do our very best work last when we are absolutely maximally trained up as possible. Well, kind of, right? I mean, you want to make sure that when it's game time and you need to perform under the lights, that you're maximally prepared and trained to do your best work. And so some of those earlier subjects you might have seen were probably a little messier because we were learning. We were developing an experiment, we were developing my own skills in collecting the data. All these different factors combine and work together to create that situation where you're going to see those elements in the data. So that's a very practical sort of reason why you're going to see some differences in the signal to noise ratios of the respective data sets. Does anything else come to mind as some reasons why you might have seen some differences in these files as opposed to the last one. Yes?
Oh, no, I was just thinking, because like also with the neurologically damaged patients, you want to make sure you get the best you can, just because that's all you have. You can't, like, it's harder to find neurologically damaged people.
It's not just harder, it's incredibly harder. And,
Yeah.
and how much room for error is there with these patients? Zero.
You worked with them for 5 years?
No, I worked with me for 5 years
Oh.
to work on them for 1 day apiece for three patients, and also 6 controls. So the controls are just as important as the patients, but we talked about that last class, because if you're expecting that it's going to be very difficult to find reliable effects in patients, therefore in order for there to be something meaningful to report, it's very difficult to report a null finding, right? But that's kind of our hypothesis, right? With neurological damage to the medial temporal lobe or the hippocampus, or we would presumably hypothesize a null finding, right? These ERP effects, these differences between memory conditions, will go away after damage. That's a null finding. How do you report that with only 3 people? Well, the real trick, and we're going to work through this today a little bit too, is you don't report the null finding. What you do is you report a significant finding of an interaction between groups of conditions. So between group interaction. A condition by group interaction is your gold standard when you're going to deal with these clinical patient research projects. And so that, you can have a null effect in one group. What you need is for there to be a significant interaction of those conditions between groups. Now you're not reporting a null effect, you're actually reporting a reliable, statistically significant effect of the interaction across groups. Does that make sense? So it's a really big deal. It's a really important point to take home, because you're going to have to work with that if you're going to deal with these issues in your papers. So it's not going to be enough to report that you had a null finding in one group. In order for there to be something meaningful to report at a statistically reliable level, that is, at least, you're going to have to be able to find a reliable difference between groups in the conditions that you're exploring. So let's say that you were exploring misses and correct rejections in your first set of hypotheses in the first half of the class. It's not going to be enough to just look in patients and say, oh, they don't show any differences for hits and or misses and correct rejections. That difference went away, it was attenuated. That's not going to be enough. What you're going to have to say scientifically is that we explored the group of patients, but we also compared that to a group of healthy control subjects, and those control subjects did show a difference in those conditions. And then what we did is we did a condition by group analysis. Basically, you can do it essentially as an ANOVA test. You guys remember ANOVAs? Okay, so you're going to be expected to rely on that knowledge that you learned in earlier classes. I'm not going to teach you the stats of an ANOVA because this isn't a stats class, but you're expected to know that because you passed those classes and moved on to this one. And so, welcome to the real world. Everyone's graduating in 3 weeks. This is how it will be at work. So we need to remember what it is that we learned and what we were taught. So you can do it as an ANOVA, where you run basically that test with factors of condition, and you're going to have 2 levels of that factor, right? Your conditions might be hits and correct rejections, and you're going to have another factor, which is group, and you're going to have 2 levels of that factor, which the factors for the groups, right, would be patients and controls. So you would have a 2x2 ANOVA, and when you run it, you'll be able to explore to see not only if you have a main effect of condition, but if that condition varies as a function of group. That is there a reliable or statistically significant condition by group interaction? Okay, that's going to be your gold standard. That's what you want to find. And I'll show you some ways to do that. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have 2 questions. Well, the first question is one ANOVA. Okay, I know we have 2 groups. However, we're doing the hippocampal patients versus the controlled, right?
You can, but I want to give you, so I don't mean to cut you off, I'll come back.
Okay.
I'll let you finish just a second, but the question was, we do have 2 groups, clinical hippocampal deficit patients versus controls, but maybe you don't care for that. Maybe you're like, whatever, that's boring to you. Maybe that's not what your hypothesis is about. You also can have different groups as well. You can have an aging study. You can have young adults versus middle-aged adults, in which case you're going to have a group of our 6 middle-aged controls versus our 30 healthy young adults about your ages, right? So you can have, I'm trying to show you guys, we have lots of different ways we can make hypotheses, right? You can have hypotheses that we talked about last class, which is about memory, right? You can talk about memory hypotheses in terms of explicit memory, implicit memory, recollection, familiarity, right? We have 4 different effects that we've found in that regard, okay? You can also make hypotheses about attention. We referred to the N2PC ERP effect from the Dr. Luck's book in the text for the course that you would have read in the chapters, right? Related to attention at those posterior sites. Okay, so you can look for 4 different memory effects, an attention effect. We can look at different just confidence effects. Okay, we also talked about looking at pre-stimulus brain state effects for these same conditions. Right, so that's 7 different possible ways you can look at, shape your hypotheses. You can also look at how any of those 7 could vary as a function of hippocampal damage, or what is the role of medial temporal lobe structures in any of those. That's 8 possibilities. That's actually kind of doubles those prior 6, because now you can look at all of those in different ways. So that's kind of like 12 or 16 hypotheses possibilities that you could have. And then you could also, instead of looking at how those effects vary as a function of hippocampal damage or medial temporal lobe structures, you could also look at how a 9th way, or if not 18th or 20th, however you want to do your math on permuting these combination of hypotheses out, look at how they vary as a function of aging, right? Middle aging versus healthy young people. So I'm just trying to, give you guys examples to help you cook up and think about different hypotheses that you could explore. Because it's a really rich data set for that, with lots of different possibilities. You're limited only by your creativity. So yes, to pick up from where you left off, you can look at the group of 3 versus 6, but you can also look at the group of 6 versus 30. Okay. Or you could combine the 6 and the 30 and have 36 versus 3.
Okay, so with that, I was trying to figure this out on my way home last night. I was like, okay, but when you're doing an ANOVA, right? Like with an interaction, is there going to cause like a problem if the sample sizes between the 2 groups are different? No, right?
Nope.
Okay.
It won't, and I'll show you how to do that today as well.
Okay, because everything I'm learning in rigs is like it's all equal, so.
It all depends, but yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, well, I will show you the ways to do that. So, I know some of you guys are working on implicit memory. Did, Nicole, you said you were working on implicit memory, right? Misses and correct rejections. Did you perchance, not to put you on the spot, but did you perchance have a chance to read the 2015 paper on the hippocampal patients that I had on implicit memory?
Yeah.
Okay, so the reason I ask is, did you remember the part in there where we did a control analysis where we actually combined those groups of 30 and 6, or it's actually 25 healthy undergrads and 6 people, and we created one big group to compare to our 3 controls, or excuse me, patients? You remember that? Remember what we found or what we did it for?
You did repeat it.
That's okay. But the idea was that we wanted to see if those effects varied basically as a function of age between the groups, and they didn't. And because they didn't, and we saw that all the other demographics of the groups are the same except age, we said, well, if the one factor that they seem to differ on is age, and then we do an exploration that finds that the ERPs didn't happen to differ on a factor of age for that particular comparison, then they can basically consider one big group. And it gives us a lot more statistical power by which to identify effects. And then we did that permutation analysis and all those other good things that helped move that project along. So that's one thing you could do as well. You could have a group of 6 versus 3. You could have the group of 3 versus 30. You could have the group of 3 versus 36. You can combine them. I'm trying to give you guys options and ideas because I really want you to explore your own creativity and have the liberty to do that, because this is very, very cool, unique data, and it's a unique opportunity for you to develop those differential approaches and hypotheses. So, yes, very good questions.
So, and then my second question is, based on the data of like the hippocampal patients, could it be that they try harder? Is it why it's a little cleaner? Because they have to have more effort when doing the test as opposed to just healthier?
It's a good question. Do they try differently between patients? And it's kind of a question that we don't know 100% answer for, right? Because very sort of philosophically as psychology majors, right? You know that it's how do you measure how hard people are trying? Well, really one of the only ways to do that is to ask them, right? And if I ask all of you guys the same question, you guys are all going to give me a different answer. right? And even if you guys all say that you're trying equally hard, right? And I ask you, are you trying really hard, a little bit hard, or medium hard in this class? And everyone says I'm trying really hard. That might be different for all you guys though still. What one person considers hard could be a different type of trying than what another one does. So it's a really tough problem in the whole field of psychology, right? But you're right, it's an issue. Maybe they're doing that, but we don't worry about it too much because one, we can't really control it all that much. Two, we can look in the data and figure that out. Both the behavioral data, we can see that they perform very equivalently to controls in at least the low confidence recognition, those 4 responses. But we can also see physiologically, and you guys will see this in your data coming soon as you analyze it, that their physiological patterns are also going to look very similar to controls, paralleling the behavior, at least in the familiarity-based effect. Which suggests that if they were trying differentially, maybe you'd see different patterns of either physiology or behavior. We don't see it. It's not a reason to completely rule it out, but it's a reason to mitigate the concern. You guys understand the differences between that? Okay. Let's see here. So, yeah, strategy-based issues are always difficult, but one way that we controlled the strategies was, remember, we gave them the same things to do it in coding. Right? We say, just press yes or no for, is this animate or live? So we can try to control strategic processes, at least in that little regard. Yeah, Kelsey?
I actually was just wondering, because with my first paper, I didn't find much of a difference, but I think it's partly because I only looked at like one electrode site.
And that's okay.
And I wanted to, well, for this I was thinking now that I'm like done with the first paper, I wanted to try and look at multiple electrode sites,
Sure.
see if maybe I can actually find that difference.
Yeah.
So I could do that, and then say if I do find that difference, can I like, then see if maybe I like take it a step further. Like can I do that? Can I go back
Yeah,
a little bit on
totally.
the previous paper? And
Absolutely. You can rescue those effects. In fact, Nicole knows how to do that, because I did that for her. How do we do that for your project?
By the cluster, like the triangular round where it's like
Yeah. So what we did, how many of you guys in your first paper reported at least one ERP finding that was non-significant? Yeah, a lot of people, right? Okay, well what we did in Nicole's paper, so let's say you have your topography map here, right? You have your nose, your left ear, your right ear, and I don't know, pick, what were you, PZ, that electrode? So you were basically here, right? PZ, right? Parietal midline. And she had an ERP that looked kind of like whatever that was. And let's just say she had a big effect here that she looked at, and that would have been associated with kind of a pattern that might have looked like that on the back of the head, right? Because this topography map is a difference between this condition and this one. And it looks pretty big here, so it's going to be fairly red. And she looked at it, and I know she didn't say it to me, but I know she kind of wanted to swear and say, oh crap. Because it wasn't significant. This was not statistically reliable. Right? So what do? What's one strategy that we use? Well, what Nicole said a moment ago to all of us was that we can create a cluster of electrodes. Okay, so if you want to rescue those effects, okay, we know that we're always going to have some signal to noise issues, especially in low sample sizes with ERPs. Okay, so one strategy to that is maybe this is not statistically different from this simply because we don't have enough power for it to actually be reliably different. But if we would have that power, we would be able to do that. So one way to do that, okay, is to collapse across electrode sites. So you have these other electrode sites, right? So this would be, okay, let's say this is CZ for central, this would be P2, this would be P3, and this would be OZ, occipital Z, right? So now you have 1, 2, 3, 4 electrodes. What you can do is you can average those together and create what's called an electrode cluster. Okay? And if you do that, now you've got all this extra power that's going to average together. And so some of this, what might have been very noisy data here, right? When you average when you add 4 times as much data together, right? it might not be that noisy, but it might now be a lot smoother. In which case, you're going to eliminate the variance, at least a portion of it, and hopefully be able to draw out differences that would be reliably significant. So that's one strategy you can do that. Make sense? And we can work on that individually for those of you guys who are interested. And just show you how to do that. Basically, instead of just extracting that one electrode site in Excel for your ERP measurement tool, you can extract 4 of those electrode sites, and then you just average those 4 electrode sites for each of the individual conditions, and then compare the t-test for the average of condition A versus the average of condition B, each respectively across that those 4 sites. Make sense? Kind of cool strategies, right? So we'll work then in the next couple weeks on maybe salvaging some of those effects that maybe were frustrating because they weren't significant at first. Okay? So this first section of the class, we were really just working on getting our templates down, understanding our strategies, understanding how do we write this stuff, what do we need to write, how do we do it, and now we're going to move into actually building on that and doing more of the other stuff. So we have that. So this is one way to do it with basically cluster analysis. Okay? One way to rescue ERP effects, particularly with sample size issues or power issues for signal to noise. So what's another reason that there might have been messier data in some of these subjects this time around than what you... Oh, here, I should clue you in on something. The subjects that you're now working with, say subjects 1 through 55, are the exact same subjects you've worked with earlier in the class. Exact same data. I just pre-processed them for you, a little bit differently.
ICA?
We did do ICA, but that's not going to make a difference in why they're noisier this time around, why there's more artifacts. Why might they be messier this time? What change did I talk about last class in the data? Ah, the time, yes. What about it, Lawrence? Good job. I'm sorry?
Wasn't it like a negative 1,000 to 1,000 for each action?
Yeah, so we widened up the window, right? So let's think about what happened. Okay? So earlier, we basically had stimulus onset. Right? We called that basically T of 0. Okay? Then we have time that moves this way. Right? Now, what was our windows that you guys analyzed your first set of data with earlier?
-200 to about
To 1215?
It was -200 to 15, and that was a really nice match because for, let's say we went out to 1500 milliseconds, from here to here was when we had our stimulus on the screen, which was basically you had your word, and they were responding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for whether the information was old or new. You guys remember?
Yeah.
So it made a lot of sense. And then we had a little bit of a baseline condition here out to about -200, right? And so we were able to create our epoch of -200 to 1500. Now this time, I've widened that out so that it now comes out to about -1, actually -1200 milliseconds. Okay, so now we've widened our window out. It even goes out a little wider over here. So, what we've created is a bigger time to have a bigger mess. Because remember, one of the instructions we gave subjects was don't blink when the word is on the screen, which is when you guys were analyzing most of the data. It was a little cleaner because you only looked at the time when they were told don't blink. Back here, they were told it's perfectly okay to blink. Yeah. So you're going to have this EEG data that's going to have a blink,
Yeah.
and then they're maybe not going to blink, and maybe they let one sneak in at the end or something like that. That's why it's going to look a little messier.
But why then?
Why then what?
Why did you change the time? Because we wanted to look at the baseline.
Yes, that's what we talked about last class. So we widen this window out from this red spot of negative 200 to negative 12 to allow you guys to look at brain state activity before a stimulus shows up on the screen. If you want to make your hypotheses about pre-stimulus brain activity, if you want to know what's happening beforehand and say maybe they're remembering things because they're in a better state of mind or a worse state of mind that's going to lead to worse memory or whatever you want to hypothesize, that allows you to do it because it gives you the space in which to explore. I'm sorry?
I said I'm being dumb.
No, you're not dumb at all.
Because I'm thinking like, well, because I was telling her too when we were doing the artifact project, I'm like, man, I feel like I'm throwing away a chunk of data.
You are.
And it's like, it's more obvious when you see the whole thing, and I'm like, I need to delete this part, but everything else is going with it too.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was just like, what's the point again? Because we still need to look at the pre-stimulus.
Yeah.
But it's half of it you're going to throw away, or do we not throw it away? We still have to throw away all blanks.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's a challenge, right? It underscores how important it is to collect really as good and clean of data as possible. Right? So there's a part in the textbook for the class where Dr. Luck talks about garbage in, garbage out. You can do all sorts of tricks to clean up the data, but if you put garbage, if you record data, you're probably gonna, or if you record garbage, you're probably gonna have garbage. Right? You can't clean up garbage all that much. It really underscores the importance of doing everything we can to record and collect really good data to start with. Because it's going to be messy anyways. So you got to start as good as you can. So you don't end up with that, right? So, and later on we'll talk about ways to fix that up and to clean it up. But one way to do it is, let's say that you know that your hypothesis doesn't care so much about activity that is from here over here. Maybe you don't care about this, and you're just going to stick with your normal window here. Maybe that's all you get, and that's fine. If you don't care about pre-stimulus activity, then guess what? You don't need to reject the trials that have blinks over here, because later on, do you remember when we create our ERPs and when we average our epics, we tell the time, we can define the time. We can make sure that we only include it to here. So there's some workarounds. Sound good?
I see.
Yeah. All right.
Were your participants allowed to wear contacts?
They were allowed to wear contacts. Dr. Lutz seemed, he likes to tell people not to use the contacts if they can avoid it, because it's an easy disclaimer to make sure that it's just one less factor to worry about. I wore contacts a lot back then. I never found that they made me blink a lot more than if I didn't wear contacts. And you know, if they wore contacts, they wore them, and it didn't seem to make a difference when I ran the study.
Because I always wondered, I was like, if you tell like a participant, like, because I wear contacts, since I have a really bad astigmatism. So if someone were to tell me, don't blink, I would not blink, but I feel like my contacts would dry. I don't know if it's just my head. And then afterwards, I would just be blinking.
It was only not to blink for about a second and a half.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so are there questions on this about, now we can see how our paradigm is actually influencing our physiology, right? Influencing the artifacts that we see in the physiology. As well as differences that we do as experimenters change how good or bad the data is. So those are really good important points that I'm really glad that you guys brought up. So anyways, what I wanted to do is give you guys, I was just going to kind of give you guys a tutorial and show you how to go through and do some of these group analyses so that you are prepared with the tools by which to do it on your own. How does that sound? Reasonably good? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, let's see here. I'm going to start off the way we always do, which is with typing EEGLab in, opening up our GUI, which we'll see come up here in a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to load in an existing data set. So we get a file, load, and I'm just going to start basically with the first one here, subject 3. It's been re-referenced to the average of the mastoids. It's at a 0.1 hertz high-pass filter applied to the data. Okay, we downsampled it to 256 hertz. We applied an events list. Then we epic the data. Okay, then I ran ICA, which we don't have to worry about too much for now. And we've since cleaned the data. And actually, I can come back up to my
So it's basically more like you're starting at channel locations and then you're artifact rejecting right away.
I'm sorry?
Oh, like at least the way I was looking at it when I was looking through it is it's more like you just started, instead of having to, do the E-list and all that, you just have to put the channel locations to it, and then you just can start artifact rejection.
Sure, but I was just showing you, these are the things that we did do to the data. They're not going to come in like that normally, but we've already done those steps. And so it's been, actually the data I'm going to use now, I've done CR is my abbreviation for basically having components rejected, which has something to do with the ICA. We'll talk about that maybe in a class or two later down the road. And AR just means that I did the artifact rejection that you guys are familiar with. Okay, so what this is a list of data sets that I've cleaned the same way that you're cleaning them. Okay, so I'm not asking you guys to do anything that I don't do myself 1,000 times over. Okay, so now that we've gone ahead and cleaned our data, okay, let's load one up, and we're going to create a little script so that we can process the data en masse. Okay, so we've loaded that in, and the first thing we're going to do is come to our ERP list menu, and we want to compute averaged ERPs. Okay? God bless you. We're going to compute our averaged ERPs. And just like normal, this is all stuff you've done before, by the way, so I'm going to go through quick because I know that you guys have a lot of experience with it. So you can follow along. We basically don't need to adjust anything here, and we can just hit run. Do you want to continue? And I'll just say yes. And I'm going to call this subject 3. I'm going to call this, just so I have it on my data files, I'm going to call it 433 as our class, and that's it. So I'll do that. So then we name it here in the file name. We give it subject number 3. I like to add the course name just so that I don't get confused what data set I'm working with. And then we want to save this ERP as, and all you have to do is just click this box that says same as the name there, and that works pretty well. Now, one thing that you might want to do is make sure that you browse to verify that it's going in the right place. So when you browse, it'll just show you the folder it saves in. So for me, it's within our course folder of Psych 433X. It's within the data folder for me, within EEG, and I had created a folder for basically our second hypothesis data. Help to keep it separate. That lets me know that it'll save in there. So I can exit out of this, but it just is a verification that that's where it's going, and all you do is hit OK. And so it'll think, it'll run. That's what's happening here. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to create my little list of the subject data. Okay? Or excuse me, the list of the processing commands so that I can do them all quickly. So the first thing I'm going to do is type EEGH. That gives me the command that I started with. And let's grab that. I'm going to open a new script on the top left. And I'm going to paste those commands in. Okay. Okay, so let's see here. Yeah. All right, so that was the first thing we did. And just to reorient you, we typed in EEGLab and we loaded our data set. The file name that we loaded is this big long file name that was artifact rejected. And the path that we used to get to that file is our directory here. Basically, the desktop, our Psych 433 class, data, EEG, our second hypothesis data for EEG. So that's just our name and our folders. No big surprises there for you guys who've done this for a little bit. And I want to get the ERP commands though too. So basically I want to get the command for creating our average function. So that's what I'm getting here. I typed ERPH in, and when I come back to our editor, I can type that in, and that's what we see here. So just to show you guys again, the next command was we wanted to average the EEG into our ERPs, and when it was done, we named it 3_ basically class 433. We added we click that option to save it as the same name for the file. And our path was this long directory there. Sound good? Okay. All right. What do we do next? We come to ERPLab, and we need to select the next thing. What is that next thing that we've been doing? After you create an ERP file.
ERP operations,
Bin operations.
Bin operations, exactly. And why do we need to do that?
so that we can have like different things to compare.
Yeah, exactly. We want to add our different bins to compare stuff to, right? So we've got to go to ERP operations, and we're going to apply bin operations. So I will do that again here. ERP operations, bin operations. And I'm going to do that. And in case you don't have that loaded, we found that in our folder for our course 433X, in the folder for scripts, and then we went to event lists, and we picked the bin operations folder, or excuse me, file for 11/7/2015 is the one that we liked. So let's get that, and all you do is hit run. And we can see in the background, our command window, that all these bins are being loaded. And it'll take a minute or two because we got a lot of bins in our file. But you guys have done this by now, right? And so what I'm showing you is that we're going to do this, but we can do it now once, and then I'm going to write a script that does it for the other 38 people or however many people. Make sense? Save some time? So I always like to run it once by hand and then extract those individual commands from EEGH and ERPH commands so that I know that the code that I'm writing in the script is exactly the code for exactly what I did by hand, which is what I want to replicate. Yes, ma'am.
And then this is after you do the artifact rejection, right? So
Yes, ma'am.
you're not out.
It is after the artifact rejection.
Okay.
Yep. And we're almost getting there. Just about done. Okay, so that's done. Let's get the equivalent command. So I come back in here, and that's shown right there. We could also get it by typing ERPH, of course. But we copied that, and let's put that in our next line down here. Okay, so one thing that can be helpful is I like to use little notes. So remember we introduced this before about how to script in MATLAB, and I add this little percentage sign, and it turns the text green, and that means the computer doesn't read. It makes it invisible to the computer, which means we can type notes of all sorts of gobbledygook, whatever you want to say. So I like to put little reminders to me of what each section does. That way you guys can learn what's being done here too. So why don't I fill that in? So first thing we did was load the data in of EEG that was artifact corrected. So Kelsey, that was your question. That's the first thing we did. Our second thing that we did here, we basically created an average ERP. Our next thing that we did was we saved that ERP file. And what we just did here was we applied bin operations file. Okay, what do we do next?
So you just did the bin operations, so you're going to copy and paste what you did with that below it, like below what you script.
Well, I just did that.
Oh, okay.
So that's what we,
Oh, so the next,
that's what this is here. We copied and pasted the function for bin operation.
usually after bin operations is when you start plotting the ERPs, right?
Measure.
Oh.
Why don't we save this sucker?
Oh.
Let's save it, right? It's really important. Because some of you guys had to redo your files earlier because there were different bins between subjects as we forgot to save them. Okay? So let's come back here. Under the menu for ERPLab, I'm going to hit Save Current ERPset. Okay? And I'm just going to name it the same. Actually, hold on. What I'll do is I'll ERPset Save Current ERPset as. Let's do as. and it'll ask us what we want to save it as, and I'll put an underscore. We've been using binop to show that it was subject 3 in our 433 class, and it's had bin operations applied to it. Okay, so there we go. It's going to save it, and once it's done saving it, I'm going to do ERPH again, so I can grab that command, and I can paste it in to our script. This way it's done exactly for everyone else. Right? So this is what we did for a handful of your guys' data sets earlier for your first experiment when we needed to process through quickly, right? Lawrence, remember we did that for yours? We did it for yours, Nicole. I think we did it for yours, Loveth, and a handful of other people's. Okay, so it looks like we just got that here. Okay, our equivalent command is right there. All right. So let's paste that sucker back in to the ERP file. Okay. So we got that. And what do we need to do then?
Is this one you want to do a grand average? Or?
Yeah, you want to do a grand average, but we're gonna wait off on that for now because I think we're pretty much done. Now what you would like to do individually is you'd like to bring up those individual subjects and inspect their ERPs with your eyeballs to make sure that there's not something funky going on in that subject's data. Really important step, but you don't need to code it into here. Because that's just a manual step that you want to look at the data and say, is there something here that looks off?
That's fine. Right?
Yeah, you want to plot the ERPs and look at that. But in terms of processing steps, we're just going to rest here, and I'm going to take a minute, and I'm going to fix this up into a script that'll do everybody at once. Because now we know it does exactly what we want it to do, right? Okay, so let's walk through exactly how we do that again and script it. Okay, so we created what was called a for loop. You guys remember a for loop? It was a loop that goes through this whole script for every different subject that we have in our list. Right? Okay.
So now you just have to replace the 3.
Yeah, we just need to replace our subject number. So the first thing we did is write the word for. And you remember at the very bottom, we close that with the word end. And we will start working our way in beneath. So we create a variable. Let's call it S. Our variable S equals subject 4. So let's just put number 4. Now, we need to define a new variable. We'll create, let's say it's shorthand for subject, for our subject number. So we'll just call it subj, S-U-B-J. And we're going to say that if we want, it needs to read in our subject number, let's say for our files, but it needs to read that number as a string of text information, right? Because MATLAB is kind of goofy. It can read numbers as either letters or numbers. So we're going to take this number that we have identified and turn it into a string of letters. So it's just a little nifty command. We've done this before in class. We use the function called num2string. N-U-M, the number 2, and then str for string. Then you open your parentheses and you're telling it, change this number into a string. And you have to put in the number that you want it to change. Well, that number is always going to change for every subject number, right? So we just put the letter S in because that's what we'll define as changing. So we start with this. It sets the whole foundation of the whole script. Okay? So we're just going to type S in there and close our parentheses. And don't worry, I'll give you a copy of this script too. I'll upload it to the class. Okay? Okay.